Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Amnesty accuses Iran of intensifying clampdown ahead of elections. Saudi Arabia takes new measures to avoid an uprising. And death toll mounts as shelling of Syria's Bab Amr continues. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Amnesty International said repression intensified in Iran ahead of legislative elections scheduled for March 2nd.
The organization released a report detailing the repressive measures used against all types of mobilization after opposition figures Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karroubi called for protests in February of last year.
The organization said an arrest campaign was carried out in the past several months and included lawyers, students, journalists, activists, members of religious and ethnic minorities, and directors.
It pointed to what was referenced as the Iranian government's malicious attempts to display solidarity with protesters in Egypt, Bahrain, and other countries swept by the Arab Spring.
The organization also spoke of the Iranian authorities' reinforcement of internet surveillance and its recent sentencing of bloggers to prison.
In addition, the report pointed to a complete deterioration of human rights and the intensified harassment campaign against human rights advocates.
It also stated the number of executions has quadrupled in the past year and called on the international community to take action.
Joining us from Tehran is Dr. Fuad Hizadi, a political science professor at Tehran University. Dr. Fuad, how would you comment on Amnesty International's accusations?
In the name of God, the most merciful and most compassionate, it seems to me that the report by Amnesty International somewhat lacks specific details. As you know, we have elections on Friday, and there is competition for every seat. There are 12 competitors, or candidates, vying for each seat. So the competition is very fierce. And we have division within the reformists' camp, which is the camp that objected to the outcome of the last presidential elections. For this reason, there is a group of people who will not participate, but there's another group of reformists who will take part in these elections. They are exerting all their efforts to run their campaigns and express their points of view. I was really surprised when I read the report by Amnesty International in light of the reality of the events on the Iranian street and because it did not contain any specific details. They only say arrests were carried out, but don't say how many were arrested or identify the detainees. They didn't mention that information. So I am not certain who is behind this report at this time. It's a little perplexing.
In your opinion, how can talks about violations and the direct allegations against Iran affect the upcoming elections in the country?
I don't think this report will have any impact. A large number of the people competing in these elections are members of major political parties, and another large number are independent candidates who are not affiliated with any particular party. As I said, we have 12 candidates competing over each seat, so the competition is intense. In fact, no one will give Amnesty International's report any attention or interest. Al Jazeera's studio in Tehran was the one who informed me about this report. It is not taken seriously in Tehran, and that is because this report lacks details, so we're not sure what the report is trying to claim.
Iran's envoy to the International Atomic Energy Agency says Tehran does not rule out providing access to its military sites, including Parchin. Ali-Asghar Soltanieh said access to military sites will be possible under a set of conditions that Iran has set for the IAEA to follow. He also rejected allegations against Iran's nuclear energy program as baseless. Soltanieh added that last week Tehran offered the IAEA delegation to visit a site which was referred to as a place for testing explosive material in a report by the IAEA chief, but the delegation was ordered to return to Vienna. Soltanieh said Iran is determined to continue its cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog despite sanctions and the assassination of its nuclear scientists. Previous inspections and interviews with Iranian experts by the IAEA team have led to the assassination of 4 Iranian scientists. Meanwhile, Iran has once again called for global nuclear disarmament. Speaking at a UN-sponsored conference on nuclear disarmament in Geneva, Iran's foreign minister said some 23,000 nuclear warheads stockpiled by a few countries pose the gravest threat to world peace and security. Salehi said nuclear arms have no place in an international community oriented towards lasting peace and security. Ali Akbar Salehi said the, quote, double standard towards the issue of nuclear energy seriously threatens the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT. Salehi argued that nuclear energy is not nuclear weapons, saying the rights of nations to peaceful nuclear technology should be seriously taken into consideration. The US has reportedly confirmed for the first time that a NATO radar base in eastern Turkey has begun operation. The top commander says that American forces are manning the US-made radar. The base has triggered controversy both in Turkey and in the region. Press TV's Mehdi Gholizadeh has this report.
A senior U.S. military commander has reportedly declared that the U.S.-made radar in Turkey has become operational a few weeks ago. The U.S. Army's commander in Europe, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, has reportedly said the U.S. forces are manning the radar system in Turkey's eastern province of Malatya. This is the first time a senior U.S. commander acknowledges that the radar system is operating. The system was deployed in Turkey as part of a NATO missile system. Turkey officially announced its decision to host the radar system in September last year. This has triggered numerous protests across the country. The activists in their protests said the radar system will endanger Turkey's security and will damage Turkey's strong ties with its neighbors. Turkey has repeatedly stated that the radar system is not against any certain country, but some politicians and experts believe that the system has already damaged Turkey's long-time policy of zero tension with its neighbors. Turkey says no country has been singled out as a threat in its agreement with NATO to host a radar system. The Turkish government has been pursuing a policy of zero tension with its neighbors for years, but the country's recent foreign policy decisions have raised doubts about Ankara's ability to continue this policy.
Also in the headlines today, people have taken to the streets of Yemen's flashpoint city of Taiz, demanding the expulsion of the U.S. ambassador. The protesters carried banners urging the U.S. ambassador to stop what they called intervention in Yemen. They are angry at the U.S. and its ally Saudi Arabia for keeping the former regime in power. Washington and Riyadh pushed for a deal that transferred power from the long-time ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh to his deputy in a single-candidate election. The deal also granted Saleh and his closest allies immunity from prosecution for crimes they committed during the deadly crackdown on a year of anti-regime protests. The demonstrators demand Saleh stand trial and Yemen be cleansed of the old regime's remnants. In the occupied Gaza Strip, people have demonstrated outside the UN office calling for the release of Hana Shalabi, who's held by Israel. They chanted slogans against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and slammed the US for supporting Israel in its anti-Palestinian measures. Hana Shalabi has been on a hunger strike since the 16th of February after being rearrested under Israel's administrative detention policy. She was freed in a prison swap deal by Israel and Hamas back in October. Before her release, she was imprisoned for 25 months under the same administrative detention policy that arrests individuals without trial. The sole power plant in the besieged Gaza Strip has totally shut down due to running out of fuel. The closure of the plant has left much of Gaza without electricity. The power plant supplies around a third of the besieged territory's electricity. It needs 600,000 litres of fuel a day to keep running. This is the second time the plant has been forced to shut in less than 2 weeks, putting hospital patients at risk due to constant power outages. Egypt had promised to provide fuel for the Strip's sole power station. Israel's blockade on the Gaza Strip has left 1.5 million Palestinians in hardship over the past 5 years. Press TV's correspondent Yusuf Al-Helu says Palestinian officials want Egypt to allow the delivery of fuel to Gaza through the Rafah crossing.
For the second time in less than 2 weeks, Gaza's only power plant was forced to shut down due to a fuel shortage, and this will leave much of Gaza in total darkness for up to 12 hours a day. And it's winter time here, and people heavily rely on it. Of course, it's essential. Palestinian Energy Authority here urged the Egyptian side to supply the Gaza Strip with the needed fuel. Of course, this fuel for the past year has been coming through underground tunnels from the Egyptian side. Today, we were told that Egyptian security forces, they confiscated a large shipment of fuel that was supposed to come through the tunnels for the power plant. So Palestinian officials here argue that they will not rely on the Israeli side. That's why they have been urging the Egyptian side to open the Rafah crossing for goods, including fuel, so that Gaza's only power plant is working again.
The Saudi Interior Ministry announced organizing protests is prohibited in the kingdom, considering them to be a violation of Sharia or Islamic law. It said security forces have the right to take the appropriate measures in response to demonstrations. Meanwhile, an economic report indicated Saudi authorities will be changing the kingdom's economic strategy to meet the demands of the Arab Spring and maintain calm among the citizens.
The Saudi Interior Ministry renewed the use of organized state terror by declaring that protesting is prohibited in the kingdom, considering it a violation of Islamic law. The ministry confirmed its forces are authorized to take all measures to prevent protests. The ministry's security spokesman said the authorities strictly prohibit demonstrations, marches, and sit-ins, saying that even calls to organize protests contradict Sharia and the values and norms of Saudi society. The spokesman stated this stance is based on regulations, instructions, and measures to counter illegitimate goals, in reference to peaceful protests demanding reforms. In the latest such protests, Saudi security forces killed many protesters. In an article titled "Arabia Waits Its Spring," head of the Movement for Islamic Reform, Saad al-Faqih, who is in exile in Britain, said the kingdom is staggeringly corrupt and repressed, making it ripe for revolution. He referred to the large number of political prisoners and mounting corruption, confirming that $100 billion are missing from last year's state budget. Al-Faqih blamed Western media outlets for focusing only on protests in the eastern province and the situation of women, while disregarding the general anger on the Saudi street. The Saudi government is working on adopting new policies. An economic report released by Manar Institute, consulting and managing energy projects, revealed the Saudi regime is preparing to change its economic strategy to face the demands of the Arab Spring and to calm Saudi citizens. The report also assured that Saudi authorities are seeking to raise the price of its oil exports because of protests over the budget, especially the $130 billion allocated by King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz to contain the Saudi people's anger. And while an increase in spending is meant to contain the anger of the Saudi street, the crisis is being aggravated between the ruling class and the religious authority, which consists of Salafists on one hand and Wahhabis on the other. That challenge poses as great a burden on the authorities. The latest manifestation of that conflict was the ruling family's criticism of religious scholars, who condemned the king's insistence on holding Al-Janadriya festival, saying the religious scholar's statement undermines national security and is a deviation from reason and law. Observers believe the crisis will aggravate the current struggle within the ruling family.
In Syria, over 100 people were reportedly killed across different parts of the country, including 20 killed in the violent artillery shelling of Halfaya in the countryside of Hama. In addition, close to 100 people were injured. In the city of Homs, Assad's brigade showered the Baba Amir neighborhood with a barrage of missiles and rockets.
For 24 days, the city of Homs has been violently shelled, leading to additional deaths and injuries among women, men, and even children. The regime of Bashar al-Assad's killing and destruction machine is still using all warfare means, including missiles, rocket launchers, and artilleries. Activists say the brigades cold-bloodedly carried out a massacre against the residents of the neighborhood of Baba Amer as they were fleeing with their families to nearby villages. 64 men and youths were executed after being stopped by Assad forces at the New Qaira checkpoint. At the same time, the Baba Fadmur neighborhood is witnessing violent shelling and heavy gunfire. In addition, security forces in the Shabiha stormed the area. Commercial and residential areas near the Fudaus roundabout were occupied as large empty trucks entered the town of El-Jiza, coinciding with the deployment of Assad's gangs alongside the main road in El-Mujanzarat. In the city of Al-Rastan, indiscriminate artillery shelling was renewed as Syrian security forces attempted to storm the city from 3 directions, and the Free Syrian Army exerted efforts to resist them with the various means accessible to the members. Meanwhile, activists uploaded videos of El-Juri Mosque and Homs being subjected to artillery fire from Assad's brigades. In a notable development, social networking sites circulated a video of an airplane belonging to the Syrian Air Force shelling 2 villages in Homs. In the countryside of Hama, Assad's brigade stormed the town of El-Khattab under heavy gunfire. The artillery shelling was renewed in the city of Helfaya for the 4th consecutive day. This comes as the International Committee of the Red Cross announced it entered Hama for the first time in over a month and distributed aid to around 12,000 people. It also delivered food and relief supplies to Homs and Idlib, indicating the Syrian Red Crescent needs better security conditions to distribute supplies. Marat al-Naman and Sirmin and Idlib were not spared from the atrocities of the Syrian regime and its Shabiha. They endured violent shelling, leading to wide-scale destruction of residential buildings. Meanwhile, Assad's brigades carried out raid and arrest campaigns in the countryside of Damascus and Daraa, where violent clashes were reported between the brigades and the Free Syrian Army in the town of Da'il. Alongside these bloody developments on the ground, angry supporters of the Syrian opposition took to the streets of Syrian cities and towns to mark a new mobilization called the Monday of Loyalty for the Children of Daraa. Large protests were held in the capital Damascus, especially in Kafr Sousa. Protesters chanted anti-regime slogans and demanded its downfall. A student demonstration was launched from a school in Souk al-Salhiya and was subjected to a violent attack by security forces in the Shabiha. A number of students were arrested and injured.
Sudan accused what it referred to as foreign forces of being behind the ongoing oil dispute between Khartoum and South Sudan. Sudanese Foreign Minister Ali Ahmed Karti said during his visit to China that foreign powers are unhappy with China's presence in Sudan.
During his visit to Beijing, Sudanese Foreign Minister Ali Ahmed Karti accused what he referred to as foreign forces of being behind the ongoing conflict between Sudan and South Sudan, explaining they're upset over China's investments in his country. Karti said he conveyed a message from Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir to Chinese President Hu Jintao. Bashir reaffirmed Khartoum's permanent support for China and its investments in Sudan. The Sudanese minister did not hesitate to send a warning to unspecified foreign powers, saying they intend to prevent Chinese companies from drilling for Sudanese oil.
It is obvious in our assessment that these powers fundamentally reject Chinese investments, fought them during the oil exploration, and beat the engineers who were working in the oil fields installing equipment and pipelines. Since the war, the goal of these powers has been very obvious, and that is to prevent China from investing in Sudan's oil industry.
The oil issue between Sudan and South Sudan started when Juba stopped transporting its oil through the North's pipelines at the beginning of the year, after Khartoum decided to retain half of the oil as a fee for transferring it through its territory. South Sudan is still forced to transport its oil through the north in order to export it from Port Sudan. 1/3 of Sudanese oil is exported to China. Rashid Sakhari, BBC.
Back here at home, negotiations between the government and settlers have reached a snag over the agreement to demolish the Migron outpost. The talks apparently broke down over conditions under which the outpost would be dismantled and the families relocated to a nearby settlement. A consultant for the residents told Arut Sheva that there were matters of principle that still need to be resolved.
The gap between the government of Israel and the people of Migron is at the moment is very small, however significant, because the people of Migron are saying that when in a 3.5 years time, when they actually have to evacuate and to go to the new community, if the legal conditions are that the legal conditions are that nobody must destroy or destruct the current community and the houses of the current Migron, then they should not be abolished. And according to the law, everything that is right will stay there forever. And they want to sharpen this into the paper, into the agreement between them and the government of Israel. And until this will not be sharpened, they will not sign on the agreement between them and the government of Israel.
Drivers, prepare yourselves for unprecedented pain at the pump. Price of gasoline expected to jump to an all-time high tomorrow night at midnight. A liter of 95 octane will rise by some 30 agorot, putting the price of a full-service gasoline at nearly 8 shekels per liter, 7.97 to be exact. Organizers of the protest movement against soaring gasoline prices, which was launched over a year ago, said they will not accept the hikes without a fight. Meanwhile, a group has launched a new Facebook campaign calling on the public to overuse electricity on Thursday night for 8 minutes, beginning at 8 o'clock. This in an attempt to bring down the national electricity network. They claim that aggressive action, also directed at the planned price rise on electricity, is the only action that will make a difference. The campaign has so far garnered over 16,000 Facebook supporters.
University students in Baghdad demonstrated against the federal government's new budget for stipulating they would be allocated funds instead of monthly salaries. The students called on the legislative and executive authorities to quickly end their suffering by granting each student a monthly salary, similar to their peers in the universities of the Kurdistan region. Our correspondent, Ra'id al-Maliki, attended the student demonstration and has the following report.
University and college students gathered in front of the Bab el-Muaddam campus to hold a demonstration to denounce what they described as the failure to guarantee their rights. The students condemned items in the government's public budget that stipulate the monetary funds they are granted will be deducted from their salary if they are not employed by a government institution. They said this stipulation does not meet their demand for monthly salaries to be appropriated from a budget they consider to be their share of the oil revenue.
We heard of armored vehicles and a change in the budget on TV. Did they forget about the Iraqi students' rights? Where's the Iraqi student? Where are their rights?
The students, who stressed the demonstration is independent and received no support from any political party, summarized their grievances and made key demands. They called on the legislative and executive institutions to take these demands into consideration. They said they will hold another demonstration if the requests are not met.
Allocating salaries to all students in Iraqi institutes, colleges, and universities. Second, we demand a law to allocate salaries from the 2012 budget, and we ask that this law be approved, ratified, and enforced this month. And if this law is not implemented this month, all Iraqi students will hold another demonstration and a public sit-in.
From here in Baghdad, the voices of university students rose. The students remain in limbo, waiting for either a response by the officials or a rejection of their demands, just like previous ones. It is worth mentioning that Al-Muwatan parliamentary bloc is the first party to raise the issue in parliament, asking for appropriating monthly salaries to students. However, the political agendas of certain blocs prevented the plan from moving ahead.
Our students are an investment in our future, but they still thought it was too much to give them. We requested 100,000 dinars per month, 100,000 dinars per month from the budget for students in colleges and institutes. We asked that it be added in a separate category. It can be taken from the additional revenue generated from the rise in oil prices.
From Baghdad, Ra'ad al-Maliki, Al-Furat.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.